Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ABR discussion as we, as a company, try to all earn our ABR designations and take this class independently, but alongside each other. Um, so, prepping for today's discussion, I made a grievous error that hopefully by me doing it and showing you what happened, nobody else will make the same mistake. I wanted to be able to share my screen and go through the slides of the content. I've done the intro and the first two modules so far in the class, and I wanted to be able to go along with everyone as we discuss it. And so when I went to the presentation, and then I reached this point where it was, resume on module 3. I was like, okay, well, let's go back to the beginning so that way then we can cycle through. But apparently it wipes out all of my progress. And so I'm going to have to continue to re-go through all of these slides. So we're not going to be able to do them together because I'm going to get stuck at these things like where you have to hit play and listen to the whole audio before you can move on. So instead, it can simply be, I made notes when going through it, and I'll lead the discussion that way of by using my notes, bring up the topics of what was taught in the first two modules, and then we can, bounce off each other any thoughts we had about stuff. Let me actually, just so you can see my notes, it's the magic will be pretty uninspiring, but here are my notes. So the first module being about defining our value proposition for the clients. Like that's what they wanted from the outset for us to learn. As part of this ABR course, we need to know what it is that our value is as a buyer's agent. And so, none of the content, at least so far from my view, was all that surprising. I don't know, did anybody just at the outset, did anybody come across something that they didn't already intrinsically know in some way? Or is it just, is your experience the same as mine where we're basically reading the things that we already knew if we've been doing this? If it's not, if we're veterans in this, or even if we've been doing it just for a couple of years, we know what our role is supposed to be, and this is just spelling it out and drilling it home. Any thoughts there?
I think, yeah, I feel like it's a good refresher.
Yeah.
And then that's where, when I said I feel like I'm studying for my license again, because it's just, it's good stuff. And we should know it. And it's, but I see where I am right now, 45 minutes into it, I see it as a good refresher at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like when talking about our value proposition, yeah, we all know, intrinsically that we need to have value and bring that value to our clients. Otherwise, what are we doing? Why are they going to be hiring us? But it is useful to take a moment and take a class that forces us to think about our value and really be able to identify it and like just if you do mentally get there of identifying, okay, yeah, here's the value I'm bringing. Then when you're in that situation going forward, you're more likely to keep it in the back of your mind. Okay, yeah, this is the things I need to be doing in order to achieve that value that I'm going for.
Yeah, I was going to say there wasn't really anything super surprising, but kind of like you just said, Jordan, it's good to have that refresher of what your value is, especially right now with the whole lawsuit thing as a buyer's agent. It's good to have that kind of on hand, especially if you're having a buyer consultation or something like that, to be able to express your value to the client so that they're aware that you everything that you're doing for them kind of on the back end. So
Yeah. Yeah. And so, when they were talking about just if you approach the role as a buyer's agent as being the buyer's advocate, that I think is a good way just to start off things, is knowing that is, I mean, they ended it basically, the module, with reiterating it in the other way of saying the product we are selling is our service and not homes. We, as buyer's agents, we're not selling homes. We are selling our service to the buyers. And I think that is worth putting into words, because you think in some ways that, yeah, we're out there selling houses, but no, we're not. We are selling the value that we create in serving our clients. And so keeping that as the focus for what we do is our services. Have that be then what you need to, constantly be trying to improve upon. And yeah, I mean, the goal is to help them find the right house for them. That's the ideal. But it's the process that is what we're doing. It's not about the house. We don't build houses. We don't, we're not providing houses. We just help, play matchmaker and help them find it. And that's the service side of things. We don't sell a product, we sell a service. They had mentioned in the module, like, what it is that buyers value when looking for an agent. And the three they listed off was honesty, experience, and reputation. And just knowing that, the general public, that is what they want out of a buyer's agent, is honesty, experience, and reputation. That's how they're going to be evaluating somebody. Then you can use that to self-reflect and decide, okay, of these, where can I improve upon? Am I doing things that feel a little inauthentic, or when I'm in conversation, am I, telling clients white lies that, are building a house of cards that may come crumbling down if I get caught in any of these? Yeah, that I need to not do that, because that's going to undermine the honesty aspect of what they want. From a experience standpoint, yeah, even if you're new to this, if you haven't sold a bunch of houses, there's still things that you can actively choose to do to build up your experience of dealing with, just working with trainers. And we can do the mock interviews and all the different things that, even for somebody who's brand new, we can build the experience from a different angle. So that way, then when they comes organically through actual deals, they've got that foundation that we've helped establish, through the trainings. And then with reputation, that is very much, nurturing your relationships and just all the stuff you're putting out there into the public realm on social media and whatever that the public may come across. You want to make sure that your reputation is what you want your reputation to be. If you're doing things in public view that undermine the reputation you want to have, take a moment, reflect on that, and stop it, and figure out what is the better path forward. So just knowing that that's what the public is going to be evaluating us on, I think is useful content from, this first module. Any thoughts there? Move on. So an overwhelming plurality, it was like 40% of buyers find an agent because somebody referred them to someone. Like, that's what their one graph showed, was that I think the next highest was like 15%. But the most common way a buyer comes in contact with a buyer's agent is because they heard from a friend or somebody else, like, hey, reach out to Keisha because she did a great job for me. And so then they contact Keisha. And so it's not so much, scanning Google or whatever. It's having a personal connection to, friend in common type thing, sphere of influence, that is most likely to generate those relationships from the get-go. And so, that helps give us direction then as to what we should be focusing our efforts on. If we want to get more buyers, the best way to do that is to generate more relationships in which referrals could come from. Rather than focusing on some of the marketing, the billboards or the shopping carts or, any of the stuff that, yes, those do result in clients, and buyers, but since most buyers are going to be connected to you through a referral, it's good to know that that needs to be a bigger component of where you're expecting, what you're doing to generate leads. Thoughts there?
No, makes sense.
So the value proposition points of differentiation. They talk a lot about branding, and being able to differentiate yourself from other agents because we're not all the same. And if the public views us as the same as any other agent, then it does make it more difficult for, to get them to want to choose us over somebody else because, what is that reason? How are we different? The four things that they think are best to focus on when trying to differentiate yourself are education, expertise, experience, and your essence. So with like education, doing this ABR, any designations or certifications we're earning, anything that shows to that current stranger who may have, been referred to us from somebody that they know, just to, so then that stranger, they see us, if we are leaning into the amount of education that we've received beyond just receiving our license, that is something we value is we're taking these courses, we're doing these extra things in order to have the most education that we can to serve them. It's all about providing service to them. They want somebody who's well-trained and well-educated to do so. That's what these classes are about. Leaning into that, that's a differentiation, a branding opportunity. When it comes to your expertise, similarly, most agents, I think, typically lean into this one because that is where then you become the local market expert. It's about knowing your geography better than, that agent who's a couple cities over. It's the easiest to lean into because we as agents, we can't all be experts in everything. We have to decide what we want to focus our expertise in. Most people, while I am currently listing a house down in Southgate, I don't know anything about Southgate. And so I would not even try to pretend that I'm a market expert in that area. They're choosing us to list their house because of other reasons. But if I wanted to generate more business, and I'm trying to lean into my expertise, I'm not going to pretend that I'm a Southgate expert. I'm a Brighton area expert, and that's what I'm going to lean into. And so I want to know more about what's happening in Brighton than most agents, and I'm going to then convey that to the general public. And so if they then are, trying to figure out why to choose me over somebody else, if they want somebody who knows Brighton really well, that's a reason then for them to choose me. So that's one form of expertise, but there's all sorts of, there's the financing type or if you're a horse property expert, you can have your expertise be in whether it's part of the process, part of the locality, part of the product itself of, different types of homes. You could be a condo expert or a co-op expert, and just list a bunch of co-op properties. So finding, it's niche branding in a way, but leans into what you are an expert in. Your experience, that is similar to education in that it's just about giving them reassurances that you know what you're doing. If you've been doing it for a long time and you have a bunch of experience, or even if you've not been doing real estate a long time, but you have experience in something else that can then be utilized as a way to convey to them that they should still trust you. These things are about the building that layer of trust, because if they're going to have you be their advocate, it's got to have a trust basis. And so experience, that can be then something that, you can set you apart from somebody else that they may be choosing between you and them. If they want somebody who's got more experience dealing with their specific type of needs, if they, similar to the niche almost, as far as if they need a house that's, handicap accessible, and that's something that you have a lot of experience with, is, finding those properties, and even those that aren't quite there yet, but knowing how to make the conversions. And, if that's something that you have experience with, and that's something that they need, then yeah, they're more likely to reach out and choose you. And then lastly, your essence, just who you are and your values. And this is a lot like my Pillar 1 class that I taught about finding your niche marketing and your branding, where it is like if you're a gardener and being the green thumb agent, just something about you and your personality that you want to lean into to find that commonality that you can, because you have this shared interest in mind already, or, these shared values or activities, that then they already feel that connection to you that they wouldn't feel with somebody else who doesn't have that common shared interest. So, those are the 4, points of differentiation where you can then lean into or choose and decide, okay, this is where my strength is going to be if I try to amplify this as why somebody should choose me over somebody else. I just went on a long diatribe there. Anybody want to add stuff to that?
No, that's great.
Oh, it's good reminders. That's what we need.
All right. And so at the first meeting, they talk about making a good first impression. And then, this class is very much leaning into wanting us to discuss upfront, representation and agency, and make that clear from the get-go, what this relationship is. In that, we are, trying to serve them and provide our services to them as an agent on their behalf. And so not being coy about it, not being afraid to talk about, hey, I want to be your agent. And so in order to best serve you, as a client, I want you to sign this contract. Because, the alternative, they talk about the 2 things, the difference between a client and a customer. Those are 2 very different things. As a client is the person we serve a client, and then we, wait, I forget now. Does anybody remember offhand how they phrased it? It was,
Yeah.
I forget exactly
Yeah,
what the phrasing was that distinguished between the 2, but the client, you work for a client, you work with a customer. That, I think that was the phrasing, is yes, if you have a client, you are working on behalf of the client, you are working for them. If they're just a customer, you're working with them to help them, but it's not working on their behalf, you're just helping them. And so I'll share the screen to show the old car and so our duties to the clients and our responsibilities to customers. So if you're working for someone, you have certain duties of obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, reasonable care, and diligence. And so then the module went through each one of those. I mean, they're self-explanatory. I could dwell on them, but I don't want to drag this out too long. So, but we understand, the concept here of, these are the things that we, should feel as our duty when we have a client. Now, if they're not a client, if they're just a customer, if we're, in theory, acting as an impartial transaction coordinator, we have, or if they're just a lead that, we don't actually have any real relationship with, we still have a responsibility to be honest, and the accounting and reasonable skill and care and disclosure of material defects. We still have those responsibilities, even if they are just a stranger that we're interacting with on a customer basis. When they become a client, that's when they level up to all these additional, benefits. And so this then helps by being aware of the difference between these. When you're meeting with that potential client and you're trying to get them to understand, this is our first meeting, but I want you to be my client and not just somebody that I'm helping, but somebody that I have an obligation to, some duties to, this is the benefit of signing this exclusive buyer contract. Since, come this summer, we're going to be required to get that up front.
Before we show a house.
Yeah, before we even start showing them houses, knowing that this is, the benefits to them. It's about focusing on how it benefits them to sign the contract rather than to not sign the contract. And so that I think was useful. That's how I plan to utilize module 1 in moving forward, is just knowing how to do that, of conveying the value proposition for actually signing this buyer contract now that we have to get it up front. Any thoughts there? Anyone willing to give me a 30-second break and say something?
Well, I agree, the buyer agency, we make it more about them. It's like, this is really to protect you. I mean, think about it. Would you go to court without a lawyer? Would you do your I mean, for me, I would never think of doing my taxes. I have an account, I have a professional that's trained, and that's what they do. That's all they do. So explaining it that way, I think takes a little edge off, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it kind of ties back into that whole being able to convey your value to them, especially if you're at like a preliminary meeting and you're trying to get it signed. Being able to express your value, I feel like would make them more just comfortable and apt to sign a contract with you that way, as opposed to just bringing it up and putting it in front of them.
Right. Yeah, you don't, yeah. It becomes awkward if you make it awkward. If you just, oh, here's a contract I need to sign, but you've not done any of the preliminary, like conveying to them what they need to know before you present them with the contract. And you want to build a basis of trust, but I think it's a lot of trust to just say, oh, by the way, here, sign this thing, don't worry about what it says, or why don't worry about why you need to sign it. Just
Have we got our updated one yet? The buyer's broker, because a couple weeks back.
right. Well, so yeah, I mean, I don't think that, because none of the changes are yet required on us, I don't think the forms are, none of the changes to the forms have been finalized, since we still,
Okay.
we don't want to make a change now and then, 3 months from now make another change, if anything, as it all
So
shakes out.
currently then, how do you recommend we do? Strike out that center part that's got all the breakdown on the buyer's broker?
I mean, no, because I just had clients sign yesterday or 2 days ago. I mean, I still discussed, compensation, because we still need now, because the one thing that is definitely going to change is where it says, the compensation offered in the MLS. That's going to have to get struck out.
Right, okay.
But we're still going to need a contract saying that they're agreeing that if we help them buy, there's an obligation of a 3% buyer commission, or whatever it may be, 2.5%, whatever you're choosing to do, that can be satisfied from the seller's proceeds if the sellers offer it. If they don't, the buyer's still going to have that obligation. I mean, that doesn't change. All that's changing is where it's communicated with, whereas the standard's been through the MLS. Now we're going to have to figure out the workaround there.
Because we also have to work around if the sellers absolutely refuse to give a concession, that the buyers need to know up front that they're responsible to pay the 3%.
Which has always been the case. If there was a MLS listing that was offering 0 and we wrote an offer on it, technically speaking, yeah, our buyer that signed the contract saying, we're getting 3%. We could tell our buyer, like, hey, you still have to pay us our 3% commission separate, from what you're paying to the seller side, because they were offering 0 in the MLS. It's, that may become more common, hopefully not too ubiquitous, because I think it really hurts the whole industry. And so, the listing agents need to do a good job communicating to the sellers why it's important to continue to offer the compensation to the buyer's agent. So that the buyers don't have to have all the cash up front to be able to purchase the house.
Right. I wonder if the lenders are gonna start to be able to figure, to knowing now what's across the board. I would think that the lenders will be wise
Yes,
to say, we're gonna be able to put this in through the mortgage to be able to cover, for the buyers to pay the agent's commission. And have it not be another kick with another large amount out, like, I don't know if you can call it rolling in because there's all the federal guidelines, but you know what I mean.
yeah,
Somehow, or some verbiage or some way of getting it.
yeah. I'm fairly optimistic. I don't think that a year from now we're going to be struggling with this. I don't exactly know how it's going to land, but I'm confident that as an industry we'll have the workaround figured out well enough to keep things to be as little disruption as possible, because the more disruption it is, the worse it is for the buyers.
The buyers are the ones that get.
Oh, yeah.
And the poor veterans.
Yes,
The veterans are the other ones that they're in the worst shape
yes.
because of the way that the loans are structured.
But yeah, so let's move on then to module 2, which is the buyer counseling session. So this, module is basically about, okay, whether it's that very first interaction or, at the beginning, when you need to figure out basically 2 things, what it is that they're looking for, and then you're also trying to evaluate, is this the right relationship? Is this, are you right for them and are they right for you? And so let me share what all right, so at the outset, the thing that you need to keep in mind when you're going into it is you need to demonstrate 2 different sets of skills that you possess. First is your people skills. Are you a normal person that can sit down and have a conversation with somebody and be, I'm an introvert, generally speaking, just that's my natural tendency, but I know in this job I need to still have people skills as though I'm an extrovert and engage with people in a way that does not make them uncomfortable. And so working on those people skills, learning how to know the difference between when should you be speaking, when should you be listening, how to, for the most part, it's better to be interested in the person you're trying to engage with rather than focusing on coming off as interesting yourself. So that's the one thing to keep in mind is a skill level of,
Listen.
listen and
Dale
be,
Carnegie talks about that, and then in that book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, they talk about not interrupting and being quiet to hear
yes,
the other person,
yeah,
because you don't learn anything if you're constantly talking.
right. Be a good interviewer
Yeah.
who brings out more from them. And then you also want to, during this first session, convey to them your client representation skills. So that's the other important focus, is so that way then they can, no, that's not zooming in at all. Okay. I was trying to go in. But now what's interesting here is keeping in mind what our goals almost certainly are from this very first sit down and what their goals are. And so then being able to keep their goals in mind, and then how can you behave in a way that helps them feel as though their goals are being met. And so I thought that was a worthwhile little chart to grab, but we don't need to go through all the individual points. So the other thing to that they wanted to focus on for a moment was brand consistency. So we had kind of said earlier with leaning into your value proposition, points of differentiation and all that, creating a brand. What is it that the public thinks of you, your reputation, or just the whatever you're putting out there that is what the mass public may come across, or even if it's just individual people in small circles. What is your brand? What do they think of you before they've met you? And then when you show up, are you meeting those expectations, or is there going to be something that runs a little bit askew that kind of throws it off? You want to have consistency, and that's why this is an opportunity here for social media. If you are authentic with your social media account and you let that be an opportunity for your personality to shine through, if you're going on a personality-based brand, then yeah, that's easy then when you are meeting with them and sitting down with them for your authentic self to keep that consistent brand going. If you're going the professional route with your social media and you're trying to convey that as your branding, is that you're the professional realtor who is an expert, and that's what this is about, is their need for hiring a professional. Then when you show up and have this meeting, you want to come with true professionalism, and be aware that if you come instead a little bit too impersonal or lackadaisical, that would be just a little strange if they were expecting a professional. So knowing what it is that you're putting out there for expectations, and then during this counseling session, achieving and bringing that. So the exercise 2-1, I stole this from it because I thought, okay, yeah, it's a worthwhile exercise to do. What are 5 words that you would use to describe yourself, and what are 5 words that you think clients would use to describe you? And if those 2 descriptions of how you would describe yourself and how clients would describe you are not in alignment, then hey, you now have something to work on. And maybe it's either by changing yourself, like if your clients view you as very dependable, but you view yourself as somebody who actually drops the ball a lot, but you're just good at hiding it, then well, maybe you need to actually work on being dependable and not just good at covering for your mistakes. Yeah, if it's instead, you view yourself as somebody who is a hard worker, but they view you as lazy, then it's a matter of, being able to find ways to communicate that, where you are working on your behalf. It's likely just a lack of communication. They don't know all the stuff you're doing and you're not communicating it to them. So focus on, letting them know all the various things that you're doing on their behalf. So
I'm not good at that.
I am too lax at reaching out to tell my clients things sometimes because I don't want to bother them. But then there are those people who don't like being left in the dark. And so
There's that line.
Yeah.
There's telling them too much to
Yes.
freak them out, or keeping things quiet until you get to the bottom of how you're trying to solve it.
yeah,
I'm tenacious where I don't stop, but I've had to learn to not tell too much, because it can, depending on the client, if they're a nervous idiot, you tell them too much, then they're just gonna flip.
Yeah.
They're gonna not be able to want, and they'll be panicked to go forward. Yeah. So you gotta be, what's the term? We gotta read them. You gotta learn to read them, really quickly once you start working with them, to see what kind of a client they are.
Yeah.
Introverted, extroverted, nervous.
and actually that brings us to the next point. Because there's 2 goals. So there's the 2 skills that we're trying to bring to this session, our people skills and our representation skills. But there's 2 goals to this, which is doing the needs assessment and establishing their price parameters and figuring out from their side of things, what it is that they want. But then the other goal
This
is
form in our stuff,
So yeah, this is all
Oh,
stolen from the slides.
Okay, this is the stuff, I already did the first segment, but I don't remember seeing this part.
No, yeah, and that's where I was a big fan of what's
Yeah.
coming up here, but then the other goal for this person is identifying if you actually want them as a client. Because, in addition to figuring out what it is that they want, if during this very first counseling session with them, you're realizing that you're not the right fit, have the ability to make that clear and be able to navigate that and be like, hey, listen, you know what, based on what it is that you're looking for and all those things, maybe, there is, I'm not the best agent to serve your needs. Like the service I provide, is not the optimal quality for what it is that you're looking for. And so, I can try to help you, get in touch with somebody else. But we'll come to that stuff later. Let's keep focus again on the needs assessment and establishing the price parameters. So sitting down with them and asking them certain questions. You have ask, answer, and inform. And I copied all three of these because these are useful in their own ways.
Okay.
So being able to have this list of questions for the buyers. Now, obviously, you don't want to actually just go through this list with them. That would be
No.
awkward. But knowing, like, being able to digest all of these questions, so that way then you get the big picture of, yes, these are what you're trying to get out of them during this first sit down. If you can get, these things answered, if when you're able to walk away, even though you may not have specifically asked some of these, point word for word, if after the meeting's over, you could theoretically go back and provide the answers to these because you just, touched on them during the conversation, then you've done a good job during the first buyer counseling session. So I'm going to print these off and keep these. I think these are good.
I'd like a copy, please.
Yes, I can forward this email,
Yeah.
these notes to everybody.
Okay.
The answer buyers questions, this I think is worth digesting and being very familiar with, because it's like, okay, if these are what they are going to likely want to know during this first sit down, how can I preemptively provide answers to these naturally during conversation? So, rather than waiting for them to ask, do I represent the sellers? Instead, if when I'm going over how the process works in our contract and all these things, I just need to make it clear. If they actually ask these questions verbally, that means that I've not preemptively provided the answer. And if instead I can preemptively provide it, I'm giving them that sense of trust, like, okay, clearly this agent I'm sitting down with knows what it is, can already predict what I'm about to ask and is serving my needs for me before in answering things I didn't even know that I had questions about. But obviously, yeah, as soon as I get that answer, it's like, oh yeah, that was something that is good to know. So learn this section as well. And then, yeah, informing the buyer about the process. This is where my personal strength, or not necessarily my strength, but where I have always focused my initial,
Your confidence, your confidence.
yeah, and just in general, I like to be a teacher. That's why I'm in the role that I'm in right now, is I like to teach. And so that's what I've leaned into when it comes to my clients, is I like to inform them about how things, how the process works and just real estate in general. And so, knowing then these are things that we should try to educate them about during this initial consultation, like that is a good way then to keep in mind, okay, here's value add that I'm already providing up front. When they leave this conversation, if they now know more about each of these things, just by spending that, half hour to an hour with me, that's value I've created on their behalf, is that they then walk away more confident with what they're doing. So that's why I didn't steal all that many slides from the module, but these three I thought were definitely stealing.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Any thoughts there so far? All right.
Better like that too, because it's like a checklist.
Yeah, yep. So we're sitting down with them, we're figuring out what it is that they need. And then we're trying to educate them on the process, but ask, so doing the needs assessment, that's asking the questions. Answering their questions and informing them, that's the education part. So then assessing the buyer, this is where it gets to be, is this the right fit for you? Basically, during the conversation, you need to be able to touch on, are these people actually motivated and are they actually able to purchase? Like, do they have a financing situation that allows them to be clients? If not, then it's a matter of, okay, how are we going to navigate it to turn them into, ready, willing, and able buyers? You're going to want to evaluate, are they realistic? Is what they want just not feasible for their price range? If not, then you're going to want to help educate them on what realistic expectations should look like. But if they're not seeming like the type of people who are amenable to your suggestions or what you're trying to convey to them about what to expect, then maybe they're not the right client. Like, they're going to be more frustration. And then lastly, when you're telling them things that they may not want to hear, how are they responding? Are they rude? Are they polite? So I turned it into an alliteration of ready, willing, able, realistic, and rude. Just because that's how I basically summarized what the module was saying. But it's, those are all very legit reasons for us as agents to decide, okay, based on this, I don't actually think these are people that I want to have as clients. I'm not going to be able to serve them well, or it's not worth, my efforts when I have other clients that may be better use of my time and energy.
There's some clients you should fire.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Just
I've had to fire them
They're
before,
like the,
and I've never regretted firing a client.
that when it gets to that point, you have to make a decision like that.
Yeah.
No, that's just like
Yeah. And then the remainder of the module was about the contents of the buyer representative contract, which I didn't really make any notes on because
it's gonna change.
well, and also, I mean, this Bill has written our contract. We should be very familiar with it, but a lot of what the modules seem like is if we were creating a contract from scratch, we don't need to do that. We are, we have been given the contract from Remax Platinum that we use. And so we don't need to worry about trying to, you know, care what they want in the contract. All we need to know is what is in our contract, because yes, our contract meets all the requirements of what the module is saying. But it also maybe adds additional stuff as well. We just need to know what our contract is, and so being very familiar with it is important. Talking about the duration and the scope and the compensation and all those things. Yes, knowing how to, when you sit down with the buyer during this, to go over that contract in a way that gives them peace of mind to sign it, that's important. But the stuff in the module I didn't really think was all that helpful for that. Any questions before I bring up one last little thing I thought was funny?
Nope.
All right, so then the one last thing, because with the changes coming, I had my own idea as to what I thought would be one potential solution to, if they no longer offer compensation through the MLS. My thought of a way we could get around that is, okay, we go out, we show a house, and our clients want to write an offer. At that point, I send over a document to the listing side saying, hey, before I submit an offer, I want to get upfront clarification that my buyer compensation paid for from the seller is going to be 3%. Let's say I send that over before I send an offer. Well, yeah, whatever it may, and you know, they may come back at 2.5, we may negotiate it, but that gets solidified
Right
before I submit the offer. I had no idea that that suggestion would violate our Realtor Code of Ethics
Oh.
standard of practice. That can only occur before showings occur. You can't have discussions about compensation after the showing and before the offer is submitted.
But do you remember back a while ago when I first started, one of our teams here got burned because the MLS, when she showed it, the MLS said 3%, but when they got to closing, that sucker listing agent changed it before it went to closing and brought the newest MLS ticket with them, stating a different price, and they had to take what was there. So then I started printing every MLS ticket, highlighting it, sticking it with my offer.
I can't imagine that actually worked because
It happened and they could.
the MLS can keep track of when changes are made.
But they brought it and they said, no, the MLS says this percent, and they had originally, it changed from 3 down to 2 or something
Right.
like that. I can't
That is
remember.
astonishing that if the listing side got away with that, because I would have thought there's enough safeguards in place to
You would
prevent
think
that.
so, but because of that kind of stuff, we gotta have it in writing, even if we're calling verbally, like,
Well,
how would we protect ourselves?
Right.
Have them do a text?
I hope the Realtor Code of Ethics changes where the standard of practice, because theoretically, let's say it's a for sale by owner. I would always call to say, hey, you know, are you offering buyer compensation? I wouldn't get anything in writing before. I'd always thought, like, if they say, yeah, they're willing to pay the 3%, okay, I do the showing and all that. And then I can submit an compensation agreement that they're willing to pay 3%, you know, and I'll send over the offer. I didn't realize this whole time that that would violate our standards of practice.
So we have to have it signed before we show the house.
Yes,
So
before
then that's
showing
what
the
I mean, this is gonna change how we go to set up showings.
Yes, no,
We have to have it ahead of time.
there's something there, or we have to change the standard of practice. That's my view.
Okay.
Rob, do you have thoughts?
We just dealt with this. I just dealt with this not that long ago. And I mean, in the end, it comes down to what's in writing on everything, right? The MLS will only punish them using the MLS's practices, but they're not going to force a payment. So to get what you're deserving, you got to have it in writing. So yeah, the MLS, just like Bill talks about all the time, the MLS is basically just an idea. It's a listing on Craigslist almost. Like it's not like you can the MLS can say that the appliances are included, but when you write your purchase agreement and you don't write in that you want the appliances, they're not included in that contract, even though it's on the MLS. So buyer's agency compensation kind of runs the same way.
Really? Okay.
So it's gotta be ahead of.
I mean, the MLS will punish people that make those change, like, you know what I mean? There's evidence of fraud when you do that, when you have all of that stuff going on. But how is it really enforceable if you never included it in your contract, you know?
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, so
Thank
any
you.
final thoughts? So I only covered the first 2 modules. You know, there are 6 modules total. I don't know how this is supposed to be a 12-hour class, because it took me 2 hours to go through the 2 modules, and that's for taking notes and trying to very thoroughly go through it rather than just a quick, you know, skim through. So I don't know if the you know, future modules end up being longer or where the 12 hours comes into play. But regardless, we have 4 more modules, it looks like, in my understanding. And so, I mean, the question becomes, do we want to do all 4 modules before we meet again 2 weeks from today? Do we want to do just 2 more modules and then do a third, you know, another check-in?
My problem is I'm doing all the KV core and that's priority 1.
Right.
So.
And we also have BAM going on. We have a lot going on.
So maybe we could do 2.
Yeah.
For the next one.
And
Cause that can help me. I can pick and choose. I'm doing KV core first thing in the morning, do like I'm supposed to do. And then trying to catch my other classes up.
And I think these discussions, you know, being 1 hour long is ideal. And so, 2 modules in 1 hour is much easier than trying to fit 4 modules of worth of discussion.
I agree with
So
that.
yeah, so 2 weeks from today, we'll discuss modules 3 and 4, and then I'll put it on the next month's calendar to do the final 2 modules as well. Any last thoughts before I stop the recording and send you on your way?
With all these trainings, sorry, Tony, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm just saying good stuff.
Yeah.
That's it.
With all these trainings, what I'm starting to see, particularly in my office's numbers and stuff, is the agents that are participating and doing all the things, they're actually starting to make a little bit more money now than they did last year. The agents that I don't ever see their faces and stuff, they're at zeros, big fat zeros for the year. So I think that doing ABR and doing the SLAM and all of that stuff programs, the BAM program, like it's going to keep you here so that you can actually survive this market, and not just survive. As agents leave because it's getting too hard, you're the one putting in the work. You're going to pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
I hope so. I mean, but that's just, even before we started all this, I had set my goal for this year. I was doing 52 classes. So by the time we were up north for the convention, I was already like at 22. I had just started taking on YouTube or whatever, but then with the KV Core and all that stuff coming through, I'm like, good, this guy saw a swerve here. But I just gotta be careful because sometimes I can kick on too much.
Yeah.
That doesn't help me
Well,
at all.
I want to thank everyone that showed up for this discussion, and then hopefully I'll see you in 2 weeks as we discuss the other modules. And yeah, take care.
Sounds good, thanks.
Bye, guys. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye. Yep.